Owen woke up before the sun that morning the way he always did. The farm did not wait for anyone. The chickens needed feeding. The goats needed water. The old fence on the east side had a loose post that had been bothering him for 3 days. He pulled on his boots, drank half a cup of cold tea, and stepped outside into the gray light of early morning. The air smelled like wet soil and dry hay. A thin mist sat low over the fields. Owen picked up his tools from the porch and walked toward the east fence, his boots crunching softly on the ground. He was not thinking about anything special. Just the fence. Just the work. That was how most of his mornings went. He was about halfway across the field when he stopped. Something was at the fence. At first he thought it was a shadow. The mist played tricks sometimes, made shapes out of nothing. But then the shadow moved. It shifted slowly, carefully, like something trying very hard not to be noticed. Owen stood still and squinted through the morning fog. It was big. Very big. He could see the outline now, a long neck, folded wings pressed tight against a large body, a tail curled around 2 heavy legs. The creature was crouching as low as it could go, pressing itself down toward the ground like it was trying to disappear. But it was far too large to disappear anywhere. It was a dragon. Owen had seen dragons before, but only from a distance. Everyone in the village had. They sometimes flew over the forest at the edge of the valley, dark shapes against the sky, going wherever dragons went. No one bothered them. They did not bother anyone. That was just how it was. But he had never seen one up close. And he had certainly never seen one crouching at his fence like a stray dog waiting to be shooed away. He stood still for a moment, watching. The dragon had not moved. It had not roared or spread its wings or done any of the things dragons were supposed to do when they were near people. It was just crouching there, quiet, pressed low against the fence post. Its long neck was bent downward so its head almost touched the ground. Owen took one slow step forward. Then another. As he got closer, the mist began to thin, and he could see the dragon more clearly. What he saw made him slow down, not out of fear but out of something else. Something closer to sadness. The dragon was thin. Not just lean the way wild animals were lean. Thin in a way that looked wrong. He could see the shape of her ribs under her scales. Her belly was hollow. Her long neck had no meat on it, just skin stretched over bone. The scales that should have been bright and smooth were dull and cracked, like old stone left out in bad weather for too long. Her wings were folded so tightly against her back that they looked almost crushed. Her claws, resting on the bottom fence rail, were split and worn down. One of them had a deep crack running up the side. And her face. Owen stopped a few feet from the fence and looked at her face. Her eyes were open, watching him. They were a deep amber color, the kind of color that should have looked warm and bright. But right now they looked hollow. Empty in the way that eyes get when a person, or any creature, has been through something very hard for a very long time. There were pale streaks running down the sides of her snout, from just below each eye down to her jaw. Dried and faded, but clearly there. She had been crying. Many times by the look of it. Owen had seen that look before. Not on a dragon. On people. On his neighbor after her husband died. On himself in the mirror a few years back. He stopped walking. He did not reach for anything. He did not call out or make any sudden moves. He just stood there a few feet from the fence and waited. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the dragon lowered her head even further, until her chin nearly touched the dirt. It was the smallest, most careful movement he had ever seen from something so large. Like she was trying to make herself as unthreatening as possible. Like she had practiced being small. And then, in a voice so quiet he almost missed it, she spoke. Please. Owen did not move. The voice came again, rough and dry and very soft, like someone who had not spoken in a long time and was not sure the words would come out right. Please, just a little bread. The words hung in the morning air between them. Owen looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at her claws on the fence rail. At her hollow belly. At the dried streaks on her face. At the dull, cracked scales. At the eyes that were watching him with an expression that was not threatening at all. It was something much harder to look at than a threat. It was shame. She was ashamed to be here. Ashamed to be asking. She was braced for him to shout, to throw something, to chase her off the way the others had. He could see it in the way she held herself, tight, low, ready to flinch. Owen set his tools down on the ground. Slowly so she could see exactly what he was doing. He looked at her for another moment. Then he spoke. Just bread. She blinked. Her eyes moved to his face, then away, then back again. Owen tilted his head slightly. His voice was calm. Not loud. Not scared. Just calm, the way he talked to the goats when they were nervous. When did you last eat a full meal? The dragon stared at him. She clearly had not expected that question. She had probably expected yelling, or a warning shot, or the sound of a door slamming. Not a quiet man in worn boots looking at her like she was a person worth talking to. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her amber eyes dropped to the ground. She did not answer. But the answer was written all over her, in her ribs, in her dull scales, in her hollow eyes. It had been a long time. A very long time. Owen stood there for a moment longer. The mist was still sitting low over the field. The chickens were making noise back near the barn. The broken fence post was still broken. None of that felt important right now. He looked at the dragon once more, at the way she was still crouching, still making herself small, still waiting for something bad to happen, and he made a decision. He turned around and walked back toward the farmhouse. Behind him he heard a small sound. A short, sharp breath like someone trying not to make a noise when something hurts. She thought he was leaving. She thought he was done with her. Owen paused without turning around. "I'm going to get you something to eat," he said simply. "Stay there." He heard nothing behind him. No movement. No response. He walked back to the farmhouse, pushed open the door and went inside. The kitchen was small and plain. A table, 2 chairs, a shelf of jars, a cold stove. He had not cooked a big meal in a while. There was bread from yesterday, a wrapped piece of smoked meat, some root vegetables in a basket by the wall, and a pot he could fill with water and warm herbs. Owen looked at it all for a moment. Then he started pulling things off the shelf. Not just the bread. All of it. Every bit of it that he could spare, and a fair bit that maybe he could not. He moved around the small kitchen quietly, gathering things, wrapping things, filling a bucket with water. Outside, the mist was lifting slowly. A few birds were starting to call from the trees at the edge of the field. Owen picked up everything he had gathered, carried it to the door, and pushed it open with his shoulder. Across the field, at the fence, the dragon was still there. Still crouching. Still small. Still waiting to be disappointed. Owen walked toward her through the thinning mist, his arms full, his boots quiet on the soft ground. She watched him come. And for the first time since he had spotted her that morning, something in those hollow amber eyes shifted. Just slightly. Just a little flicker of something that was not quite hope yet, but was maybe the first small step toward it. Owen set everything down on the ground in front of the fence and looked up at her. "Let's start with a proper meal," he said. "Then you can tell me whatever you want to tell me." Sarah did not move at first. She watched Owen set everything down on the other side of the fence and she did not move. She just stared at the food like she was waiting for it to disappear. Like it was a trick her tired mind was playing on her. A bucket of warm water with herbs floating on top. A wrapped piece of smoked meat. Bread. Vegetables. More food than she had seen in one place in a very long time. Owen sat down on the ground a few feet away, leaned his back against the fence post and said nothing. He did not stare at her. He did not watch her with wide eyes the way people usually watch dragons. He just sat there, relaxed, like this was a perfectly normal morning and he had nothing better to do than sit in the grass. Sarah looked at him. Then at the food. Then at him again. He was not looking at her. He had picked up a small stick and was turning it slowly in his fingers, looking out at the field. Slowly, very slowly, she lowered her head toward the food. She started with the water. She drank carefully, in small amounts, like someone who had learned to be careful because there was never enough. The warm herbs in the water made a soft smell rise into the morning air. She closed her eyes for just a second. Then she opened them again and kept drinking. Owen said nothing. She moved to the bread next. Then the meat. Then the vegetables. She ate without rushing, which was harder than it sounded, because everything in her body was screaming at her to eat fast before it was taken away. But she forced herself to go slowly. She did not want to look desperate in front of this strange, quiet human who had given her more than she had asked for and then sat down like it was nothing. When she was almost finished, Owen spoke. "There is more inside if you need it." Sarah stopped chewing. She looked at him. He was still not looking directly at her. Still turning that little stick in his fingers. "I am fine," she said. Her voice came out rough. She had not spoken to anyone in weeks and it showed. Owen nodded like he believed her, even though they both probably knew she was not entirely telling the truth. A few minutes passed. The sun was coming up properly now, burning the last of the mist off the fields. A goat somewhere near the barn made a loud complaining sound. Owen glanced that way briefly, then looked back at the ground in front of him. Sarah finished eating. She sat back and folded her claws together in her lap. She felt better. Not good, not whole, but better in the way that a little warmth feels enormous when you have been cold for a very long time. She looked at Owen. He was just a man. Not young, not old. Somewhere in the middle. His hands were rough and worked hard. His clothes were plain. There was nothing special about him, nothing that explained why he had done what he just did. She had knocked on 3 farmhouse doors before this one, further down the valley. One family had thrown rocks. One had released a dog. One had simply shut their window and pretended they had not seen her. This man had sat down in the grass and shared his food. She did not understand it. So she decided to ask, "Why did you do this?" Owen looked up at her then for the first time since he sat down. His eyes were a plain brown color. They were calm. "Because you were hungry," he said. Sarah waited for more. There was no more. That was the whole answer. She looked away. Something was pressing hard against the inside of her chest. She had been holding a great many things in for a very long time, and this simple, stupid, kind answer was making it very difficult to keep holding them. She breathed in slowly. Breathed out. "My mate is dead," she said. She had not planned to say it. It just came out. Like it had been waiting behind her teeth for weeks and finally found a gap. Owen said nothing. But he went still in the way that people go still when they are really listening. Sarah kept her eyes on the field ahead of her. Hunters. 3 moons ago. He was crossing the southern ridge and they were waiting. She stopped. Started again. He was not hunting anyone. He was just flying. He was always just flying. The stick in Owen's hand had stopped moving. "I could not get there in time," she said. Her voice stayed flat and even. She had practiced keeping it flat and even. "By the time I reached him, it was already done." A bird called from somewhere in the trees. Neither of them looked at it. "I am sorry," Owen said. 2 words. Simple ones. Sarah had heard them before from other dragons, said with all the right formal expressions and careful tones. But this human said them the way people say things when they actually mean them and do not know what else to say. It landed differently. She nodded once. Then she said the harder part. The part she had not said out loud to anyone yet. "I have 2 hatchlings." Owen looked at her. "They are in a cave. 3 valleys east of here." She kept her voice steady. "Pip and Wren. They are very young. Too young to hunt. Too small to fly far." She paused. "I have been leaving them to search for food. I am gone for too long each time. I know I am gone for too long. But there is nothing near the cave and I have to go further each day and—" She stopped herself. She pressed her claws together tightly. "I just needed enough to bring back to them," she said quietly. "Just enough for a few days. So I did not have to leave them alone again so soon." Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up. Sarah watched him. He was not saying anything. He was walking back toward the farmhouse. She felt the familiar drop in her stomach, the same one she had felt when he had walked away earlier before he came back with food. She told herself to stay still. To wait. To not assume. She waited. She heard sounds from inside the farmhouse. A door opening. Things being moved. Then a heavier sound like something wooden being dragged across the floor. Then the creak of the barn door. Owen came out of the barn pulling an old wooden cart behind him. He dragged it around to the front of the farmhouse and left it there. Then he went inside again. He came back out carrying a large sack. He set it in the cart. Went inside again. Came back with a wrapped bundle. Set it in the cart. Went inside again. Sarah stood up slowly. She watched him make 4 trips. Grain. Dried meat. Root vegetables. A clay jar with a sealed top that she could smell from here. Preserved fruit packed in something sweet. A folded cloth with hard bread wrapped inside. A second bucket. Owen stood back and looked at the cart. He pushed one of the sacks to the side to balance the weight. Then he looked at Sarah. "Can you carry a cart?" he asked. "Or should I pack it differently so you can carry it another way?" Sarah stared at him. "This is for my hatchlings," she said slowly. "Yes," said Owen. "You have never met them." "No," said Owen. "You do not know me," she said. "You did not know me an hour ago." Owen looked at her with that same calm expression. He was not uncomfortable with the silence. He just waited until he was ready to speak and then he spoke. "I had children once," he said. "Raised them alone after their mother passed. I know what it looks like when a parent is running out of road." He looked at the cart. "No child goes hungry near my farm. That is just how it is." Sarah looked at the cart. At the food packed carefully inside it. Enough for days. Enough for Pip and Wren to eat properly for the first time in weeks. Something broke open quietly inside her chest. She did not cry. She had run out of tears a long time ago. But she dipped her head very low, lower than she had lowered it for anyone, and held it there for a moment. Owen did not make a big deal of it. He just picked up the handles of the cart and began pushing it toward the fence gate. "Show me which direction," he said. "I will help you get it as far as I can." It did not take long for the village to find out. It never did. A village was a small place, and small places had eyes everywhere. Someone had seen Owen pushing a loaded cart east along the old trail at sunrise. Someone else had seen the dragon at his fence earlier that morning. By the time Owen got back to his farm that afternoon, the story had already traveled from one end of the village to the other and back again, picking up extra details along the way that Owen had not actually been part of. He heard about it the next morning when his neighbor, a stout red-faced man named Bert, came stomping across the field before breakfast. Bert did not knock. He just stood outside the door and talked loudly until Owen opened it. "Tell me it is not true," Bert said. Owen looked at him. "Good morning, Bert." "Do not good morning me. Tell me you did not feed that dragon." "I fed that dragon," Owen said. Bert made a sound like a man who had just stepped in something unpleasant. He took his hat off and held it in both hands and stared at Owen like he was waiting for an explanation that would make everything make sense. Owen offered him tea instead. Bert did not want tea. Bert wanted Owen to explain himself, and when Owen explained himself, calmly, simply saying only what had actually happened, Bert got more upset, not less. "You gave her a cartload of food," Bert said. "Yes. And went to her cave. Part of the way. She carried the cart herself once we reached the hill." "Owen." Bert pressed his hands to his face. "She is a dragon." "I noticed," Owen said. "They eat people. She asked me for bread." Bert stared at him. "That does not mean anything. That does not mean she is safe. You do not know what she is capable of, you do not know what she wants, and you do not know." "She has 2 hatchlings," Owen said. "Young ones. Hungry ones. Their father was killed 3 moons ago." He looked at Bert steadily. "She walked up to my fence and asked for a little bread. That is all." Bert was quiet for a moment. Then he put his hat back on. "The elder is going to want to talk to you," he said. Owen nodded. "I figured." The elder's name was Gus. He was an old man with a short white beard and sharp eyes and a habit of tapping his finger on the table when he was thinking hard. He ran the village council meetings from a long wooden hall in the center of the village, and he called Owen in that same evening. Owen sat across from Gus and 5 other council members and told the story the same way he had told it to Bert. Plainly. Without dressing it up. When he finished, Gus tapped his finger on the table 3 times. "You understand why people are worried," Gus said. "I do," Owen said. "A dragon near the village is not a small thing. She is 3 valleys east." "For now," said one of the other council members, a tall thin man named Aldred who always looked like he had just smelled something bad. "What about next week? What about when she decides your farm is not enough and starts looking at ours?" "She asked me for bread," Owen said again. "She was starving. Her children were starving. I gave her food. That is the whole story." "You do not know that is the whole story," Aldred said. "You do not know what a dragon thinks. You do not know what she is planning." Owen looked at him calmly. "What would you have had me do?" Aldred opened his mouth, then closed it. Gus tapped the table again. "We are not saying you did wrong by feeding a hungry creature, Owen. We are saying you may have started something we cannot finish. If she comes back, if she tells other dragons there is a human here who gives out free food, we have a problem." "If she comes back," Owen said, "I will deal with it." "That is not reassuring," said Aldred. The meeting ended without any formal decision, which in Owen's experience meant that Gus had not made up his mind yet and was waiting to see what happened next. That was fine. Owen could work with that. What Owen could not work with was what happened 2 days later. He found out about it from young Tom, the miller's son, who came running to Owen's farm just after midday with red cheeks and out of breath. "They have gone," Tom said, grabbing Owen's arm. "Aldred and 5 others. Took horses. Said they were going to drive the dragon away before she got comfortable." Owen looked at him for 1 second. Then he put down what he was holding and started walking. He did not take a horse. He did not have time to saddle one. He went on foot, moving fast along the east trail, cutting through the lower field and up the hill path that shaved time off the longer road. He had been to the cave once before or close enough to it. He knew the direction, knew the landmark Sarah had described. He walked fast. Then he started to run. He was not a young man and running did not come as easily as it once had, but he ran anyway. His boots hit the trail hard. His breath came rough and loud in the quiet of the open land. He ran through the lower woods, up the long slope of the eastern hill, and down the other side into the next valley. He could hear them before he saw them. Voices. Loud ones. and the sound of horses moving restlessly, stamping and snorting in the way horses do when they are near something that makes them nervous. Owen came around a bend in the trail and saw the cave. It was a wide, low opening in the rocky hillside, half hidden by a tumble of large boulders and a few stubborn trees growing sideways out of the slope. In front of it, 6 men on horseback had fanned out in a loose line. Aldred was at the front, holding a long wooden torch even though it was the middle of the day. 2 of the others had crossbows resting across their saddles. And at the cave entrance, Sarah stood. She was not crouching this time. She was not making herself small. She stood as tall as she could in front of that low opening, her wings half spread, not in attack but in the way a bird stands over its nest. Her eyes were locked on the men. Her body was shaking, not from fear, Owen thought, but from the effort of standing that tall when she was still weak, still not recovered, still barely back on her feet after weeks of starving. Behind her, just visible in the darkness of the cave, 2 small shapes pressed close together. Pip and Wren. Owen did not slow down. He walked straight past the horses, past the startled faces of the men, past Aldred who said his name sharply, Owen, and he walked until he was standing directly in front of Sarah, between her and the line of riders. He turned to face the men. He spread his arms wide. The movement was simple. Not dramatic. Not performed. He just stood there with his arms out, an ordinary man in worn farm clothes, standing on a dirt trail in front of a cave. "You go through me first," he said. His voice was calm. Completely calm. Not angry, not loud, not shaking. Just steady and flat and absolutely certain. Nobody moved. The horses shifted. One of them tossed its head. Aldred stared at Owen with an expression that was trying to be hard but had something uncertain moving behind it. "Owen, move out of the way," Aldred said. "No," Owen said. "She is a dragon." "She is a mother," Owen said. "And those are her children behind her. And you are not getting past me to reach them." Aldred looked at the other men. A few of them looked back at him. Nobody seemed eager to be the first one to ride down the quiet farmer standing in the path. The man on the far left slowly lowered his crossbow to rest across his knees instead of his saddle. He did not say anything. He just lowered it. Another man did the same. Aldred's jaw was tight. He looked at Owen for a long moment. Then he looked past Owen at Sarah, who was still standing at the cave entrance, wings half spread, watching. Then he looked back at Owen. "This is not finished," Aldred said. "Maybe not," Owen said. "But it is finished today." Aldred held his gaze for another long moment. Then he pulled his horse around. The other men followed, one by one, back down the trail the way they had come. Owen stood with his arms still out until the last horse had disappeared around the bend. Then he lowered them. Behind him, he heard a long, slow breath, the kind that comes out of something that has been holding it in for a very long time. He turned around. Sarah was looking at him. Her wings had folded back against her sides. Her eyes were wide and bright and she did not seem to know what to do with her face. From inside the cave, a small head appeared at her side. Then another. 2 pairs of wide amber eyes stared at Owen from the darkness. Owen looked at them. Then he looked up at Sarah. "I think," he said quietly, "it is time the village learned a few things." Owen stayed at the cave for a while that afternoon. He did not plan to. He had come running across 3 valleys to stop 6 men on horses, and he had done that, and he probably should have turned around and gone back to his farm. The goats needed checking. The fence still needed fixing. There was always something on a farm that needed doing. But he did not leave. He sat down on a flat rock near the cave entrance, caught his breath, and somehow the afternoon just kept going around him. Sarah did not say much at first. She settled herself near the cave mouth, folding her legs beneath her in the slow, careful way of something that was still not entirely comfortable in its own body yet. Still healing. Still finding its way back. She watched Owen with those amber eyes and he watched the valley below, and neither of them felt the need to fill the quiet with noise. That was something Owen had always liked about animals. They did not talk just to fill space. He was starting to think dragons were the same way. After a while, Pip appeared. He came out of the cave in the cautious sideways manner of a small creature that very much wanted to see what was happening but very much did not want to be seen doing it. He was small for a dragon, though Owen had nothing to compare him to. About the size of a large dog, maybe. Dark greenish scales, a little ragged at the edges the way young things sometimes looked, like they had not quite grown into themselves yet. His eyes were the same amber as his mother's. He stopped about 10 feet from Owen and stared. Owen looked at him once, then looked away. He had learned long ago that looking directly at nervous creatures only made them more nervous. You had to let them come to you. Pip stared for a while longer. Then he took 3 careful steps closer. Then he stopped again and stared some more. Ren did not come out at all. Owen could see the faint gleam of two eyes watching from just inside the cave entrance, but the second hatchling stayed exactly where she was. That was fine. Everyone moved at their own pace. The sun was getting lower when Sarah finally spoke. "Something has been moving at the edge of your land," she said. Owen looked at her. "My land." "The farm." "The east fields." She kept her eyes on the valley. "I have been crossing that way at night when I go out to drink from the stream. I have seen tracks. Smelled something." She paused. "It is not animals. Not normal ones." Owen was quiet for a moment. "What is it?" Sarah was quiet for longer than felt comfortable before she answered. "When a guardian dragon dies," she said slowly, "there is a space left behind. My mate kept these paths safe. He had done it for many years. The creatures that live in the deep forest, the dark ones, the ones that do not come near open land, they knew his presence. They stayed back." She looked at her claws. "He has been gone for 3 moons now. They are starting to remember that no one is watching." Owen thought about this. He thought about the sounds he had been hearing at night lately at the far edge of the east field. He had told himself it was foxes. Or wind in the fence posts. He had been telling himself that for about 2 weeks. "Shadow creatures," Sarah said. "That is the closest word I have in your language. They move at night. They test boundaries first, small things, easy things. A broken fence. A missing animal. They are not stupid. They check what is safe before they push further." Owen thought about the goat he had found missing 10 days ago. He had assumed it had gotten through a gap in the fence and wandered. He did not say anything, but something in his expression must have shifted, because Sarah looked at him. "You have already seen signs," she said. It was not a question. "Maybe," Owen said. They sat with that for a moment. "I want to stand watch," Sarah said. "At night. Over your farm." Owen looked at her. "I am not strong enough yet to do what my mate did," she said quickly, like she wanted to be honest about that before anything else. "I cannot guard the whole forest. I cannot close the paths he kept closed. But I can watch one farm. I can keep them back from one piece of land." She met his eyes. "It is the least I can do." Owen shook his head slowly. Sarah's expression shifted, a small tightening around her eyes, like she was preparing for a refusal. "It is not the least you can do," Owen said. "It is not a payment. You do not owe me anything for the food." "I know that," Sarah said. "That is not why I am offering." Owen looked at her. "I need somewhere to be useful," she said quietly. "I need something to protect. I have been running and hiding and begging for weeks and I am so tired of it." Her voice stayed even, but there was something underneath it that was not even at all. "Let me stand watch. Not for you. For me. Because I need to remember what it feels like to stand instead of crouch." Owen understood that. He understood it in a very specific way that he did not need to explain, because some things you understand in your bones without needing words for them. He had felt that same thing after his wife passed, in the months when the farm had been the only thing that kept him moving forward. Not because the farm needed him. Because he needed the farm. He nodded once. "All right," he said. "But you eat before you stand watch. Every night. That is the condition." Something shifted in Sarah's face. It was not quite a smile, he was not sure dragon faces worked that way, but it was something in that direction. "Agreed," she said. It was almost evening now. Owen stood up and stretched his back and looked at the valley going golden in the low light. He should head back. It was a long walk and he had been on his feet since before sunrise. He was reaching for his jacket when something touched his hand. He looked down. Ren was standing next to him. She had come out of the cave at some point without him noticing, quietly, on very small careful feet, and now she was standing right beside him with her nose pressed lightly against the back of his hand. Her eyes were closed. She was sniffing him in tiny careful sniffs, the way a small animal checks something it has decided might be safe. Owen went completely still. He did not move his hand. He did not make a sound. He just stood there and let her sniff. Ren sniffed his knuckles. Then his fingers. Then the inside of his wrist. Her nose was very small and surprisingly warm. Then she opened her eyes, looked up at him, and very slowly blinked. Owen very slowly blinked back. Ren stepped back, apparently satisfied with whatever conclusion she had reached, and sat down near her mother's front leg and began cleaning her face with her paw in the businesslike manner of someone who had important things to do. Owen let out a long quiet breath. Then behind him there was a sudden scrambling sound. He turned. Pip was gone. So was the small bundle Owen had set down by the rock earlier, the cloth wrap that held the last of the bread and some leftover carrots he had brought from the farm in case the hatchlings needed more food. Owen looked at the empty rock. Then he looked at the tree line to the left of the cave, where the sound of small fast feet was rapidly disappearing into the undergrowth. Sarah made a low sound that might have been embarrassment. "Pip," she called, with the tired tone of a parent who has said a name in that exact tone many, many times. From somewhere in the trees, there was a rustling sound, a pause, and then the distinct crunching noise of something eating a carrot very fast before anyone could take it back. Owen stared at the tree line for a moment. Then he laughed. It came out of him suddenly and completely, a real laugh, the kind that starts in the chest and takes over before you can stop it. He laughed at the empty rock and the rustling trees and the sound of that carrot being eaten with great determination somewhere in the bushes. He laughed until his eyes watered. Sarah was watching him with an expression that was definitely something in the direction of a smile this time. When Owen finally stopped, he wiped his eyes and shook his head. He could not remember the last time he had laughed like that. It had been years. He knew it had been years because it felt strange and good in the way that things feel when you have not used them in too long. He picked up his jacket. "I will be back tomorrow evening," he said. "With more carrots, apparently." It started with silence. That was the thing Owen noticed first. Not a sound, not a shape in the dark, not a broken fence or a missing animal. Just silence. The wrong kind of silence. The kind that falls over a farm when everything that usually makes noise at night has suddenly decided to stop. The crickets went quiet first. Owen was sitting on the porch in the dark, the way he sometimes did when sleep would not come. He had a cup of cold tea in his hand and he was not thinking about anything in particular, just sitting and listening to the night the way a man does when he has lived alone long enough that the sounds of his land become familiar as breathing. Then the crickets stopped. Owen put down his cup. He sat very still and listened. The goats were quiet. The chickens were quiet. Even the wind had dropped to nothing. The whole farm had gone flat and silent in a way that made the back of his neck prickle. He stood up slowly. He went inside, moving quietly through the dark kitchen without lighting a lamp. He found his crossbow on the wall where it always hung. He loaded it in the dark by feel alone, the way he had done it enough times that his hands knew the job without needing his eyes. He came back to the porch. Sarah was already there. She had come down from the hill without a sound, which was remarkable for something her size, and she was standing at the edge of the farmyard with her head low and her nostrils wide open. Her eyes were moving slowly across the darkness of the east field. She did not look at Owen when he stepped onto the porch. She just said very quietly, "They are here." Owen stepped down off the porch and moved to stand beside her. He looked out at the east field. In the darkness it was hard to see anything clearly. Just the flat black shape of the field, the slightly darker line of the fence, and beyond that the tree line, a jagged edge against the slightly lighter sky. Then he saw them. They were hard to look at directly. That was the first thing. His eyes kept wanting to slide away from them, like they were a smudge on glass that disappeared when you focused on it. They were dark, not just the dark of night but a deeper dark, a wrong kind of dark, shapes that seemed to absorb the little light around them rather than reflect it. They moved low to the ground, quick and liquid, more like shadows moving on their own than anything with a body. There were many of them. Owen counted 7 along the fence line before he stopped counting and accepted that the number did not matter. Sarah made a sound low in her throat. Not a roar. Something quieter and more serious than a roar. A warning sound, the kind that said, "I see you and I am not moving." The shapes along the fence stopped. For a long moment nothing happened. The farm sat in its bubble of wrong silence and the shadow creatures sat at the fence line and Sarah and Owen stood in the farmyard and nobody moved. Then one of the shapes pushed through the fence like the wood was not there at all. Sarah moved. She was faster than Owen expected, even now, even still not fully recovered. She crossed the farmyard in 3 long strides and hit the east field at full speed, and when she opened her mouth the fire that came out was not the great roaring column he might have imagined. It was thinner than that, rougher, the fire of a body that was still rebuilding itself. But it was fierce. It was absolutely fierce, and it lit up the field like a sudden sunrise, and the shadow creature that had pushed through the fence recoiled from it hard and fast. Owen was already running. He crossed the farmyard and vaulted the fence rail and landed in the east field with his crossbow up. He did not have fire. He did not have claws. He had a crossbow, 24 bolts in the quiver on his back, and the knowledge that whatever these things were, they did not like light. He fired. The bolt passed through the nearest shadow shape and the creature made a sound, a horrible flat sound like something tearing, and pulled back. Owen was already reloading. His hands moved fast and certain, the old muscle memory taking over completely. Sarah was cutting through the dark ahead of him, claws and fire, moving in short bursts, driving the creatures back from the fence line. They were fast and they were many and they kept splitting apart and reforming, and every time she drove a group back another one came from a different angle. Owen planted himself at her left flank and stayed there. Every time one came from the left he fired. Every time Sarah pushed right he moved right with her. He did not try to be a hero. He did not run at them or try to drive them alone. He just stayed at her side and covered the angle she could not cover and reloaded and fired with the steady rhythm of a man doing a job that needed doing. Sarah knew he was there. He could feel it in the way she moved. She left her left side open just slightly because she knew he was covering it. They had not discussed this. They had not practiced it. It just happened the way things happen between two creatures who have been paying attention to each other. 3 times the shadow pack tried to push through together, rushing the line in a group. 3 times Sarah hit them with everything she had and Owen fired into the edges of the rush and they broke apart and scattered. The 4th time they did not rush. They simply stopped. They pulled back to the tree line and sat there, those wrong dark shapes against the dark of the trees, and after a moment Owen realized they were not regrouping. They were leaving. One by one the shapes seemed to thin and dissolve backward into the trees until the tree line was just the tree line again, dark and ordinary and quiet. The cricket started again. Owen stood in the middle of the east field with his crossbow still raised and listened to the crickets come back one by one until the night sounded normal again. Then he slowly lowered the crossbow. His hands were shaking a little. He noticed that and accepted it. That was what hands did after things like this. He turned. Sarah was standing a few feet behind him. She was breathing hard and one of her front legs had 3 long shallow cuts across it where something had gotten through. Her fire had gone out and she was standing in the dark just being large and tired and present. Owen walked to her. He looked at the cuts on her leg. Not deep but they would need cleaning. You are hurt, he said. So are you, she said. Owen looked down. There was a tear in his jacket sleeve and a dull burning sensation along his forearm that he had not noticed until just now. He pushed the sleeve up. A thin cut, not serious. Fair enough, he said. They stood together in the quiet field for a moment. Then Owen became aware of lights. Lantern lights coming from the direction of the village. Voices. People coming to see what the fire and noise had been. They came in a group, 15 maybe 20 villagers, some with torches, some with tools held like weapons, all of them stopping at the edge of Owen's property and staring at the scene in front of them. A torn-up east field. A man with a crossbow and a cut on his arm. A dragon, bleeding, standing in the dark. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Gus pushed through to the front of the group. The old elder stood there with his lantern held up, looking at the field, at Owen, at Sarah. His sharp eyes moved slowly across everything, reading it the way old careful men read things. He walked forward. He walked past the fence, across the edge of the field and stopped in front of Sarah. He looked up at her for a long moment. Sarah looked down at him. Then Gus lowered his head. It was a slow, deliberate movement. Not a bow exactly. Just a lowering, a bending of the neck, the kind of gesture that meant something without needing a name. We were wrong about you, he said. His voice was quiet but the field was quiet enough that everyone heard it. Sarah looked at him for a moment. Then she looked out at the gathered villagers, all those faces lit by lantern light, all those eyes that had watched her with fear or anger until tonight. It was the farmer who saw me first, she said. She said it simply, without accusation, without bitterness. Just as a fact. A plain and honest fact that she wanted the record to show. Owen said nothing. He just stood in his torn jacket in his torn-up field and looked at his boots and let the night settle around all of them like something that had finally been put right. The change did not happen all at once. That was not how things changed in small villages. It happened slowly, the way frost melts in early spring, not in one moment but in 100 small ones, each barely noticeable on its own, until one day you looked up and realized the ground was soft again. It started the week after the night of the shadow creatures. Bert came to Owen's farm with a jar of honey and stood at the door looking uncomfortable. He said he had heard what happened in the east field. He said he was not sure what he thought about all of it. Then he held out the honey jar and said it was for the dragon if she needed something for the cuts on her leg, because his wife swore by honey on wounds and it seemed like the right thing to do. Owen took the jar and said thank you and did not make a big deal of it. Then Tom's mother sent bread. Fresh bread, still warm, wrapped in a clean cloth, left on Owen's porch without a word. Then 2 of the farmers from the south end of the village came by to ask Owen quietly if it was true that shadow creatures had tested the boundary, and when he said yes, they looked at each other and said nothing for a moment, and then one of them said he had lost 2 sheep last month and had blamed a wolf. Small things. One at a time. The village turning, slowly like a large slow wheel that takes a long time to change direction but once it starts, keeps going. Sarah healed faster than Owen expected. Within the first week the cuts on her leg had closed cleanly. Within 2 weeks the dull look had left her scales and they had begun to take back their color. A deep greenish bronze, warm and bright, like old metal catching afternoon sun. She moved differently too. Less carefully. Less like something braced for a blow. She held her head up when she walked, and her wings, when she stretched them, spread fully and easily in a way that made the air move and the chickens complain loudly from across the yard. She was becoming herself again. Owen could see it happening day by day and it was a good thing to watch. Pip and Wren were another matter entirely. Nobody had told them that Owen's farm was not their home. Nobody had apparently explained to them that Owen was a human they had only recently met and not a member of their family. They had made up their minds on this subject without consulting anyone and they were not interested in other opinions. It started with Pip sleeping outside the cave. Then Pip sleeping halfway between the cave and the farm. Then one morning Owen opened his front door and nearly stepped on both of them, curled together on the porch like two dogs who had always lived there and could not imagine why anyone would find that surprising. Owen looked down at them. Pip opened one eye, looked up at Owen and closed it again. Wren did not even open her eyes. She just shifted slightly and made a small sound that meant she was comfortable and intended to stay that way. Owen stepped carefully over them and went to start his morning work. He did not tell them to leave. It did not occur to him to tell them to leave. He was not entirely sure when that had stopped being a strange thing and started being just how mornings went, but somewhere in the last few weeks it had. He brought them food. They followed him around the yard while he worked, Pip getting underfoot in ways that were genuinely inconvenient and Wren staying a little further back but always in sight, always watching. When Owen fixed the fence, finally, properly fixed it, Pip sat on the other side and watched with the focused, serious expression of someone supervising important work. Owen talked to them while he worked. He did not know if they understood everything he said. He talked to them anyway the way he had always talked to the goats and the chickens. Just words, just company filling the quiet. Wren began bringing him things. Small things at first. A smooth stone. A dry seed pod. A piece of bark with an interesting shape. She would appear at his feet and set something down and look at him with those amber eyes and wait. Owen always picked the thing up, looked at it carefully and said something about it. He said the stone was a good one, very smooth, good weight. He said the seed pod was interesting, he had never seen that kind before. He held the bark up and looked at it from different angles and said it looked a bit like a duck if you tilted your head. Wren seemed satisfied with these responses. She kept bringing things. Owen started keeping them on the windowsill. It was Gus who first came to the farm to speak to Sarah directly, without Owen having to arrange it or smooth the way. The old elder came alone, on foot, on a quiet afternoon, and Owen made himself busy in the barn so they could talk without him hovering. He did not hear what was said. But when Gus left an hour later, his step was different. Lighter. The kind of lighter that comes from setting something down that you have been carrying for too long. After that, others came. Not many at first. Slowly. A few of the farmers, asking careful questions about the forest edge, about the shadow creatures, about what to watch for. Sarah answered them plainly, without drama, without asking anything in return. She knew these paths and these creatures and she told them what she knew. The children came without being told to, the way children always go toward things that adults are nervous about. They arrived at the farm in small groups, wide-eyed, and stood at a safe distance and stared. Sarah ignored them for a while. Then one small girl, very small, maybe 4 years old, walked right up to Sarah's leg and patted it firmly, the way small children touch things without any fear at all because they have not yet learned what fear is for. Sarah went very still. The little girl patted her leg 3 times. Then she looked up at the enormous dragon above her and said, with complete confidence, "You are pretty." Something moved across Sarah's face that was unmistakably a smile. After that the children came every day. It was on a clear morning about 3 weeks after the night of the shadow creatures that Owen came out of the farmhouse and found Sarah waiting for him. Not near the barn, not at the fence. Right there at the porch steps, sitting tall, her scales bright in the early sun, her wings folded neatly. Pip and Wren were beside her, pressed close, one on each side. All 3 of them looking at him. Owen stopped in the doorway. He looked at them. He had the feeling of a man who knows something important is about to happen and is not entirely sure he is ready for it. He came down the porch steps and stood in front of her. Sarah looked at him for a moment. Then she spoke. "The forest paths need a guardian again," she said. "I am strong enough now. It is time." Owen nodded slowly. He had known this was coming. He had known it for a while. "The village will be safe," Sarah continued. "I will keep the paths clear. I will watch the boundaries." She paused. "I will come back. This is not a leaving. I want you to know that. I will come back. Owen nodded again. I know, he said. And he did know. He believed it without needing convincing. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she lifted one of her front claws to her chest. She pressed it slowly against the scales just below her shoulder, and when she drew it back there was something resting in her palm. A single scale, about the size of Owen's hand, warm and faintly glowing, the deep bronze-green color of her very best scales with a soft light moving inside it like a banked ember. She held it out to him. Owen looked at it. Then he reached out and took it. It was warm against his palm. Genuinely warm, the way a stone is warm that has been sitting in the sun all afternoon. Dragon scales given willingly carry what the dragon carries, Sarah said quietly. Her strength. Her watch. Place it above your door and nothing that means harm will cross your threshold easily. She met his eyes. It is not payment. Do not think of it as payment. Owen looked up at her. What should I think of it as? He asked. Sarah held his gaze. Think of it as a door left open, she said. So I always have somewhere to come back to. Owen looked down at the scale in his hand. The warm light moved slowly inside it, steady and quiet and alive. He closed his fingers around it gently. You did not give me just bread, Owen, Sarah said. Her voice was low and plain and completely certain. You gave me back my reason to stand. Owen did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, you would have stood anyway. You just needed someone to stand with you first. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she spread her wings, fully, completely, the great bronze-green span of them catching the morning sun and throwing warm light across the whole farmyard. Pip pressed his nose against Owen's hand once, quick and firm. Wren set a smooth stone carefully at his feet and looked up at him and blinked. Owen laughed softly. Then Sarah lifted into the sky, rising in slow powerful strokes above the farm, above the village, above the valley, until she was a bright shape against the blue morning, banking east toward the forest paths that were waiting for their guardian to come home. Owen stood in his farmyard and watched her go. Then he walked to the front door, took a nail from his shirt pocket, and fixed the glowing scale above the frame where anyone coming or going would see it. He stepped back and looked at it. The light inside it moved slowly, steady and warm, like something watching over the house with quiet and absolute certainty. Owen picked up his tools. There was work to do.